This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and pleased to have in the studio with me today our programming manager, Will Robinson. Will, welcome.
Alan, it's great to be here.
I guess we've sort of are developing a tradition here at Life 103.1 with our special end-of-the-year program that features some of those great artists that we lost this past year.
2019 was another year that we lost a lot of fantastic musicians, and it's always sad to see them move on, but it's also a time really, I think, to remember and appreciate their music.
As I was getting ready to come into the studio today, thinking about this program, I was thinking about a quote that I saw some time back that I can't quote exactly, but to paraphrase, it was something like, isn't it great the technology we have that allows us to put on a little stack of CDs all the tremendous works of Beethoven? I think we can say the same thing about these great artists. It's terrific that we have their music, that it's preserved for us.
Right, and of course, obviously, I think they meet the criteria of being a timeless favorite.
For sure. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get started, and just for our listeners' information, we're going to take these artists in chronological order of their death this past year. Why don't you lead the way, Will? Go ahead, take it away.
First artist we want to recognize is Daryl Dragon. That name may not be familiar to everyone, but he started out as a keyboard player for the Beach Boys, and he was so good at the keyboards, they called him Captain Keyboard. And he even wore a little captain's hat, and he was quite the visual, I guess, focus on the background musicians. Of course, that the name Captain stuck, and so everybody referred to him as the Captain. Well, he married Toni Tennille, and she was a singer.
And hence we end up with
Captain and Tennille. And so they were really a good team. He never said anything, but she did all the talking and all the singing. And they were together just a great musical duo. They worked quite a bit with Elton John. Daryl, of course, did a lot of keyboard work with him, and Toni did background vocals. And then, of course, they eventually went on to become quite popular as Captain and Tennille. And I thought today we would play really the signature song for Captain and Tennille, Love Will Keep Us Together, which was written by Neil Sedaka and his writing partner, Howard Greenfield.
And you mentioned to me before we got started that actually Toni Tennille at the end of the song, or at some point in the song, says Sedaka is back.
At the very end of the song, she gave a little shout out to Neil Sedaka. He had kind of been lost in the music business with all of the invasion from Britain. And so all of a sudden now, when Elton John came back, he encouraged Neil to get back into the music business and ended up writing the song and became a #1 hit for the Captain and Tennille.
Well, let's hear it. Love Will Keep Us Together. It includes Daryl Dragon as the captain, who died on January 2nd at the age of 76.
Love will keep us together. Think of me, babe, whenever.
Well, Will, tell us about Eric Haydock.
Well, Eric was the bass player for the Hollies, and I think that's one of the more underappreciated groups. It was a British group and included the great Graham Nash as a part of that complement. He played the 6-string Fender bass, and I think really they should have been more widely appreciated, but they happened to record at the same time as the Beatles. As a matter of fact, they recorded in the studio right beside the Beatles.
Abbey Road,
and so they didn't really get all of the, recognition that I think they deserved. But Eric left the Hollies in 1966 over a dispute about management fees, and then he kind of went around, formed different bands. But to me, I'll always think of him as a member of the Hollies. And, of course, they were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2010. And the song we're going to play today is one of my favorites from them. It's called Look Through Any Window. And it's really not about love or love lost. It's just about looking out a window and seeing the great world that's out, on the outside.
Another from our playlist. Let's hear it. Look Through Any Window with Eric Haydock, who died on January 5th at the age of 75. Well, Will, we lost another artist this year whose name may be a little bit more recognizable to our listeners, James Ingram. Tell us about him.
James, to me, had the perfect voice for a duo, and that was one of the things that we see his popularity really came mostly from songs where he performed as a duet. He was a 2-time Grammy winner and a 2-time Academy Award nominee. He had a #1 hit with Patty Austin, Baby Come to Me, and the song we're going to hear today is one that I think is just absolutely beautiful. It's a duet with Linda Ronstadt, Somewhere Out There, which reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart from the animated film An American Tale.
One of the songs for which he won an Academy Award.
Correct.
Let's hear it. Somewhere Out There, from An American Tale by James Ingram, who died on January 29th at the age of 66.
Somewhere out there beneath the pale moonlight.
I'm here with our programming manager, Will Robinson, who is filling us in on some of the artists we lost this past year. And the next one, Will, that you've got on our list is one that anybody who was tuned into television in the 60s is going to know something about. Tell us about him.
Hey, I'm a monkey. Peter Tork. Peter was a member of that made-for-television band, even though he actually could play musical instruments. He was quite musical, rather than some of the others did not know how to play any instruments when the band began, and they actually learned how to play their instruments. But he was probably the one that was kind of the quiet, introspective one, even though on the television show they kind of made him off as kind of a goofball, but he was actually very introspective and was the first member to leave the band. He would later join Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones on a revival tour in 1986. And of course, they had lots of #1 hits. The one we're going to play today is a song actually written by Neil Diamond called I'm a Believer. And of course, at that time, Neil was still finding his way as a musical artist as well as a songwriter. He recorded his first, and then the Monkees recorded that song, the cover of it, but then they released it first, and it became a #1 hit. And poor Neil, when his song came out later on, it just had very moderate success.
Well, let's hear it. I'm a Believer by the Monkees, including Peter Tork, who died on February 21st at the age of 77.
I thought love was only true in fairy tales.
Will, last year we dealt with an artist whose name was Joe Osborne. He's got some connection with this next one. Tell us about him.
I certainly will. Hal Blaine was a great drummer and a part of a group called the Wrecking Crew. They were a group of session musicians. And back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of these young artists would come into the studio and they really weren't that proficient with their instruments. And so rather than waste time having them do take after take after take, they brought in these session musicians. They would actually do the recordings, and then, of course, when the bands would go out on tour, they'd play their own instruments. But Hal Blaine, over his career, recorded over 6,000 singles, including 150 top 10 hits.
6,000.
6,000.
Okay. We're not talking 600. We're talking 6,000.
Right, and he recorded with people like Herb Alpert, Frank Sinatra, Fifth Dimension, Simon and Garfunkel, the Beach Boys, Byrds, Sonny and Cher, Carpenters, Neil Diamond, John Denver. I could go on and on. But he was recognized as and inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a session musician in 2000.
An amazing career. And he lived to be 90, so I guess he had some time to do some music. But yeah, what a remarkable list of songs. Will, you've given me a list here of some of the songs that he contributed to. It is truly amazing. To pick up on some of the names that our listeners no doubt will know: A Taste of Honey by Herb Alpert, Strangers in the Night, Frank Sinatra, Up, Up and Away, Fifth Dimension, Simon and Garfunkel, Mrs. Robinson, Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In, again, Fifth Dimension, Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water. Amazing. All of those, by the way, were Grammy Award-winning records.
Mm-hmm. He sat in on history of rock music from the stool behind the drum set. And the song we're going to pick today, really to highlight him, is a song that probably didn't have as much critical acclaim, but a song that was number one from Tommy Roe called Dizzy. And the thing I liked about this song was really it showcases his drumming skills and shows how he really was able to drive a melody on a song.
Let's hear it. Dizzy, including the drum work of Hal Blaine, who died on March 11th at the age of 90. We lost another artist this past year on March 22nd, Will, that may not be quite as well known to some of our listeners. Tell us about him.
Scott Walker. He was a part of the group the Walker Brothers of the mid-'60s, and the interesting thing about it is none of the members were brothers or was their last name Walker. They just adopted the surname of Walker. But he was a lead vocalist and was kind of interesting because he had a really distinctive baritone voice, and during the 60s you didn't have a lot of lead singers that sang baritone. And he, of course, recorded a lot of music and actually was very active right up almost until his death. He recorded music up until 2018. And they were really more popular in England than in the U.S., but we do have one of their songs we have on our playlist, and it's called The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. It was written by a member of the Four Seasons, Bob Gaudio and Bob Crew, and it was actually released by the Four Seasons. It didn't do so well with Frankie Valli singing it, but for some reason, Scott Walker's baritone caught on.
Let's hear it. The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore by the Walker Brothers, including Scott Walker, who died on March 22nd at the age of 76.
Loneliness is a cloak you wear. The sun ain't gonna shine anymore. The sun ain't gonna shine.
Will, we get to wrap up with an artist whose singing actually has been a part of our playlist just these last few weeks in a pretty significant way. Tell us about Leon Redbone.
Well, Leon is someone that to me has always had such an unusual and distinctive voice that he really wasn't, I would consider, a rock musician, but certainly he had that distinctive voice. Has been a very, I guess it's an important part of the Christmas music that we play. He was actually born Dikran Goblin in Cyprus, and I can understand why he maybe chose the name Leon. I'm not sure why he chose the name Redbone, though. But he has very eclectic taste. He has been seen a lot on television, things like Saturday Night Live, the Today Show with Johnny Carson, Sesame Street. He had just a really unique style. I know Robin O'Brien loves Leon Redbone.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't really care much for rock music. He said really the only thing he cared about was history. He was a real history buff. And of course, we primarily play him at Christmas time. And the song that we chose to highlight him and honor him today was There's No Place Like Home for the Holidays.
Well, we'll hear that in just a minute. Are there other artists, Will, that you want to mention that we lost this past year?
I did. I want to mention a couple of people we don't actually have on our playlist, but to me they were significant. And I wanted to make sure that we recognized them. Dr. John, Eddie Money, Rick Ocasek of the Cars, and of course the great Ginger Baker, the great drummer for Cream. And they were really important musicians in the evolution of rock and roll music. And it's a real shame that we lost them this year, but their music will live on.
Will, thank you for being with me today. And I appreciate the music history lesson and appreciate your work and pulling it all together.
Well, it's my pleasure.
We're going to go out with Leon Redbone's There's No Place Like Home for the Holidays. Leon died on May 30th at the age of 69. And on behalf of all of us here at Life 103.1, we wish you a happy and refreshing and prosperous New Year.
Oh, there's no place like home for the holidays.